Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Particle Accelerator Podcast, where we talk to future thinking business leaders about how to accelerate their company and grow their team. I'm here today with Michele. Michele, would you please introduce yourself?
Michele Colucci, a lawyer, serial entrepreneur, and founder managing partner of DigitalDX Ventures. We are a Silicon Valley-based venture fund investing in AI and data-enabled healthcare.
Awesome. Cool. Well, I want to get to know you. And the way that I do that is I would love to know, how did you make your first dollar as a human being?
Wow. My first dollar as a human being was probably organizing drawers for my parents. I had to have everything really organized in the house all the time, and I was little. So they decided it was worth compensating me for to have a more organized house. So probably that.
Oh, cool. Yeah. For me as a paper route, do you know if there was a toy or hobby you had as a child that influenced what you do career-wise today?
Probably. When I was a kid, I loved to play with erector sets. They had those sets that had engines with them, machines, so you could make windmills, you could do all sorts of things with them. And I was always fascinated with the way things worked and putting things together, understanding the pieces of them. And so what I do today is really having to understand all the pieces of the companies that we invest in and how they work together and create that well-functioning team product, etc. And so I think that probably helped a lot to understand the dynamics of how things work.
A really good metaphor for an erector set in a company. A company really is this three-dimensional object. You could look at it from one angle and get a completely different view from another angle.
That's right. Yeah, that's
Really
exactly
cool.
right.
Is there a quote from a famous person that lives in your mind rent-free?
Yes, there are a few of them. One of them is never look back unless you intend to go in that direction. That was Thoreau. And a few others that I really enjoy from Leonardo da Vinci and from a couple others. There's some really insightful leaders that are able to catalyze the thinking of either creative mindset or what's important in life or how to focus. I have a few of my favorites.
I feel like the human posture is an up and out posture rather than a down and back. At least I feel like successful people have a very open-handed up and out posture to how they work.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. It's that mindset, right? That creative mindset, that full positive mindset that really makes a big difference, I think. We call it the growth mindset is how we look at it. But I think that's really important because I think so many people get caught up in the small stuff, right? Don't sweat the small stuff, they say all the time, but they get caught up in the small stuff and forget to look at the bigger picture. And often the bigger picture is what really moves the needle when you're creating
Yeah, for
something.
sure. And especially in the startup world, you have to take the time to you're working in the business and there's so many demands of your time in the business that you forget to work on the business and the strategy. So much time can go by when I call it washing the dishes, because if you wash the dishes today, another meal is served. There's more dishes to wash tomorrow. And as leaders, if we're washing the dishes, then we're not able to really move our business forward.
Time value of money is really important.
You've built businesses across vastly different industries, from political memorabilia to film production to legal tech. I'm excited to talk about legal tech because I have some of that in my background. But what patterns do you see in identifying opportunities across unrelated markets?
I think one of the big consistent themes is how to tell a story, how to express the value in what you're creating and the importance of it in the population and why people need this. That is the storytelling that you do in film. It's the storytelling you do in legal tech and value. It's in startups. It's in everything we do. The story and the importance of that, I think, is probably one of the main common threads. The other thing I would say is supply and demand, right? Honestly, when there's demand for things, do you have the supply? And what is the demand? Understand that demand and how to serve it. A lot of entrepreneurs will create something that they want to create and it's their widget and they're in love with it, but they don't think through what other people. So we talked at Stanford when I used to guest lecture mentor there, did classes in entrepreneurship and global marketing and engineering school. And one of the things we always talked about is getting out of the building, right? Getting out of the building and asking the customers, what do they want? What do they need? Not just what do you want to build? And that's another really critically important piece that I see across all verticals. People don't oftentimes do enough of that research.
Yeah, listening to the customer, I've run across a couple of startups where the chief product officer is not regularly engaging with the customer, and that's always the first problem to fix. There's this really rich time in a business as it's developing where your early adopters are investing in your roadmap. If you're not talking to them deeply about what is it that you want to see, you're going to lose those early adopters. They can drive your roadmap towards greater demand, and then you can win more customers like them. So I agree. That's totally essential. And I've been really transformed by the idea of story brand, of being the guide while the customer remains the hero, not telling the story in a way that pushes you forward. I think the market thought that we was the most powerful word in brand, but I really think it's you, your pain point, the value that you need, your needs, your pain points, not my solutions. And I think there's this really healthy balance between people knowing what it is that you do, but not telling the story only about yourself.
Yeah.
How has your legal background influenced your approach to innovation, especially in risk assessment and business strategy?
What's important that I share from my legal background is that you have to have everything on paper, because oftentimes there are misunderstandings, especially between founders or customers. And people say things all the time, but they don't always do them. So when they have to put paper to pen and sign something, that does make a difference. Some people, it doesn't matter. They'll still not do it. You just have to try and tease out for credibility and people who are transparent, have ethics, morals, and honesty, integrity. But for the most part, people always say, "Oh, we'll do that after." And I was like, no, no, no. You do it from the beginning. You put the legal structure from the beginning. You work out your working relationships from the beginning. Everybody understands what that is, and that can prevent a world of hurt later.
I agree. In a group that I'm in, we talk a lot about, as leaders, it's our responsibility to be understood. This is really the antithesis to the victim mindset, which is like, nobody understands me. I think as leaders, you can easily feel like nobody understands me. But taking responsibility, okay, then you haven't explained yourself well. You haven't articulated the expectation, and like really taking that responsibility. And oftentimes that shows up in just writing the SOPs, writing down the expectations, doing the accountability chart, as a EOS term. I love that. I think that's so key. I want to go back a little bit to legal tech. I built a legal tech company called Legal Inc. And 3 years later, we sold it to LegalZoom. I sold it to LegalZoom in 2018. And then I was at LegalZoom during the IPO process and helped with a bunch of...
What did John say?
I worked under him for a couple of years. I was there for
Yeah.
4. And I loved that initial executive team with Frank and John. As it transitioned to a new executive team, it just wasn't the same. Great group of people. They just didn't have the same vision for what we were building, which is more of a B2B technology enablement for people who are doing formations and compliance all the time. I love the legal tech industry. I love RPA problem sets and automating things that most people wouldn't dare automate. I have the similar serial industry hopper kind of thing in my bag of tricks, but I'm interested in what you think about what are some of the biggest advantages of being an industry hopper versus specializing in one vertical.
So actually, that's an important conversation, because I think that it used to be where people always want to put you in a bag. You're in this box, you're in that box. Are you a legal tech person? Are you a healthcare person? Are you an entertainment person? But I think that if people who are a little bit more sophisticated in their understanding recognize that cross-vertical expertise is very valuable. We did a post on this more than 10 years ago on the Huffington Post when Ariana started the newsletter about cross-functional expertise. So the reality is, when you've worked across different industries, there are solutions for one industry that with tweaks might be really relevant for another industry. And if you've only worked in one area, things one way, you are a bottoms up thinker sometimes. Unless you've seen a really entrepreneur in that area, that's fine. But most of the people who have learned one thing one way want to do it one, because it's all about pattern recognition. The innovative mindset and how we look at that is people who have had exposure to different industries, but there is a core horizontal expertise that you develop. That actually is great, because you can bring solutions from different industries and apply it and see the way different people approach a problem and try and apply that to your problem, so you can actually come up with solutions that are wildly different from completely different perspectives. And that's consistent with, I study philosophy, and you think about a problem, you're trying to think about a problem from a 10,000 foot level so you can see all different angles of the problem. And so that cross-vertical expertise often brings out some of those additional options or ideas or creativity that you wouldn't get if you were in one area your whole life.
Yeah, I totally agree. I've done 5 businesses from start to exit, and we got to learn so much about putting an e-commerce product online. Yes, there was a lot of travel specific stuff. And then I went into online advertising and got to learn how data is tracked on the internet, and did those in 2 separate verticals, and then found myself in legal tech. And so what I really figured out is that my superpower, since I was in different industries, is launching and enabling these high functioning tech teams and figuring out what the user wants, not relying on specific travel expertise or online advertising expertise, but across the horizontal layer of enabling tech and innovation for the business. And I think that's why when I started LegalLink, it really took us only 3 years to amass a body of technology that LegalZoom wanted to buy. Had I not been in different industries, my mindset would have been stuck in a particular problem set and teaching. I also get bored because you solve the problem, you understand the problem set. And then just to keep talking about that for 10 more years, that's not what really gets me going. It's the idea that there is this horizontal idea of innovating quickly. And then I want to use that tool towards something new. I don't know if you experience the same.
Yeah, I think there's all different personality types, right? And so you just have to recognize where your strengths are and lean into them, make yourself into something you're not. And I think that's probably the most important takeaway, right, on this.
I found the legal industry, and I know you're not there anymore. You're doing some new stuff in healthcare, and we'll certainly move to that. I found that the legal tech industry was slow to adopt. It was just an interesting industry. And how has the legal industry appetite for innovation changed during that time? Do you think it's heating up, or did you find it a little bit sluggish in terms of adoption as well?
At that time, when I started, it was 20 years ago when I started in it, and there was nothing. It was really hard to even get a conversation going. Now it's a thing, right? Starting to scale. And of course, agentic AI and all that kind of stuff has just forced the industry, I think, into being smarter. The legal fees and the rates of legal fees and the hourly is, and the fact that people can't afford that anymore is we did unbundling stuff, right? I think that's really what's happening in the legal industry. I look at $1,500, $2,000 an hour for people, and I'm stunned that people charge that, and companies can't afford it anymore. Now everyone makes discounts. Like, then why just not give the right fee from the beginning? I don't know. I think the legal industry is definitely getting disrupted, and people who are in it are starting to recognize that, and they can use the tools to make them more efficient and effective so that they can maintain some of their margins, which I think they're struggling to do in this environment.
Was there any aha moment, or did you figure out any nugget there on how to navigate that resistance? Because I learned a stat the other day that there's still over 200,000 applications running in AS400. Like the people who know to work on AS400 and innovate in there are really aged out. We're probably talking about mortality rates of human beings rather than just a talent restriction problem. Because I still think there's a lot of legacy tech in the market. Did you learn anything about how to balance the conservative nature of legal professionals and the need for technical disruption?
Yeah, I have. The legal market, just the medical market's very similar, right? They have spent a lot of time getting educated. They spent a lot of time working in the field. The degrees mean something to them. And so when somebody is speaking to them with a degree, there's a level of mutual respect and trust. The challenge is there are a lot of regulations that surround the industry that most people, if they've not gone through that training, don't know. So it's on the medical side, it's on the legal side, it's any of these, even on the consulting side, a McKinsey consultant, right? There are processes, regulations, and ways they do things and so forth. And so when you have a bunch of people trying to sell law firms on software, it's hard for a lawyer to go, yeah, because they don't understand what's behind it. And so they can't take that risk. There's a lot of risk to, just like in the medical area, patient data, right? In the legal area, you've got a lot of sensitive data and information about companies. If you look at it from a standpoint of risk to trust, you need to be able to move the needle from the risk to the trust. There's different ways to do that. It's the same thing in female emerging fund managers. There's a lot of risk there because you don't have a lot of connectivity with the investor community. It's usually been a male dominated world. The relationships are all male to male. A lot of times men pattern match just like women do. They don't understand the female emerging manager in the same way that they understand male emerging manager. So I think that you have to find ways to move the needle from the risk that they perceive to getting to a trusted position. And that often can be impacted by mutual connections, some kind of proof points, stuff you write, thought leadership, third-party validation. Those are all the ways you can move the needle on that. Selling into legal markets, selling into doctors, selling into investors, whatever it is, you have to find a way to get them comfortable with the risks you're presenting.
Yeah, it's like that speed to trust paradigm. And so understanding like when I'm talking to someone, what inherent risks do I present just in the way I'm presenting with
That's right.
maybe some of my non-changeable characteristics, like whether I'm male or female, whether I have blonde hair or brown hair. What are some ways that I can overcome the risks that I'm just inherently presenting in who I am? Because I think if I sat down and thought about that, I could eliminate those and build trust even
Yeah.
quicker.
We all have bias, right? You work with an investor and a CEO that's done a great job, then you pattern to that CEO. We just have to be open-minded, I think, is what matters the most. I did a keynote CFA study on this, and I think that was the takeaway for me when I did the talk. You have to recognize that investors come from all different places, successful CEOs come from all different places, different cultures, certain genders from everywhere. So you got to find a way to filter for that potential for success as opposed to how you define success in the past. So if you can widen your paradigm to include things that are not related to how one presents, then I think a better way to do it. We did that with our fund. We've created a 72 data point algorithm and modeling for companies when we're looking at them. And so if our group says they're not interested, but because the scores on our modeling are really high, we go, what did we miss? Did the person have a different language? Did we not understand them well? Did they not know how to present? It could be a great opportunity. On the flip side, if we are all excited, but the machine learning scores are like, and we're like, wait, are they just a good salesperson? Is this really not the right product for us? Trying to use technology to parse through that and give us a gut check on our own biases is a good way to do it. That's how we've done it. That's how I created back in 2019 when I started this.
Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, we're really good at our recruiting process. We've incorporated some AI into our recruiting process so that we can have an objective score. That helps us with resume to job description matching, some of the things that we need to see, years of experience, those kind of things. We're using AI to pull that to the surface and then use some modern assessment tools to get that score. When we're sitting down with them, we're doing something more subjective, like quality of communication. Can they make a point quickly? Are they brief and brilliant? Just having some of those interpersonal scoring, the hiring decision is fairly objective. And we've seen really good results on that. So that's interesting that as you're looking at businesses, you're doing something similar where you're trying to bring out some objective measures. How do I feel about this founder? Do they have the team positioned for success? Do they have the connections to make this happen? That's really cool. Is there something that you've done through all of your experience that is helping? Like, how do you know when to persist versus to pivot? And how do you advise people? Because I experience the market right now to be muddy, that even the best ideas are a little bit harder to execute than they were a few years ago. In some ways easier because of AI, but how are you helping people guide that decision of when to persist versus when to pivot?
One of the classes that I studied at Stanford was nonlinear thinking, which is, you're approaching how to approach your customers or your investors or your products. And one thing I think that you have to, especially in these times, things change constantly. In fact, it's consistently inconsistent. So I think you have to think about always be sensitive to what's going on, read the room. If there's tariffs and you got a product that's going to be impacted by tariffs, you try and either find a local source or come up with creative ways to get the local sourced person to give you equity in exchange for whatever. That's what being an entrepreneur is, right? Reading the room. Are you hitting your head up against something? Are you talking to your customers? Is it what they need? They might have needed it when you spoke to them a year ago, but do they need that today? And what are their constraints, right? That's the other big issue is what are they dealing with? So many people, when you're in a company, you're thinking about it from your perspective, what you want to do, why you want to do. You have to start to think about it from your customer's point of view. What makes them successful? What pressures are they facing right now? How can you help them solve those problems? Maybe the product you set out to help them solve is a great product, but they have no budget for it right now. What do they have a budget for? Can you pivot? Can you serve that same need with your product in a different way? I think you have to think in a nonlinear model. It's here, I have a product, I'm going to sell it. I go step A, B, C, D. All of a sudden, step B is gone because something's preventing you from doing it. Well, then you need to figure out a nonlinear way to do it, or you have to find another thing to do. What are the building blocks of what you've created that can be applicable in other industries or other functions or other products? Because everybody has built something interesting, has some value, but they might not be able to see the value. So go out there, talk to other people. Here's what I built. What do you think? What would you do with this? How do you think about it? And go to as many people as you can and get that input. Get out of the building, talk to people, see what they need. How are you going to make them successful? That's what your product should be.
We've seen this. So many SaaS tools have data entry as the barrier of entry. Like, we need you to work in a different way in order to use this SaaS tool that has amazing data and visibility into your business. but then you're asking folks to shift the way that they work and inevitably need more data up front. In legal services, we needed you to fill in the company profile. And I feel like we're in such an amazing time where there's so many ways to overcome the data entry barrier. You can voice enable your product. You can AI in emails or PDF documents and give them something to work with rather than trying to do hard adoption to shift the way they work. It is an amazing time where we can rethink the data entry problem. I don't know if you're finding this in the AI space, but data is now suddenly not a nice to have, but a must have. And it's shifting those data requirements even further left. So just wondering, what are your thoughts on this new data requirement and how are you seeing people overcome that as they're trying to implement AI tools now with your focus on healthcare?
We have a lot of issues on data because of HIPAA and all that kind of stuff. A lot of regulations. Same thing with legal tech. It's very similar. People have to be mindful of that. They have to put in guardrails to make sure that data privacy maintains and so forth. Patient data is a big one in healthcare. In terms of inputting data, you can take tools that we have now, like with OpenAI, you can, the private version that it just works on your own internal data set. You have ways to securitize that and make sure that it's not copying information that you have as a company into the broader database of knowledge out there. That's really important. You have to really protect those data sets, the information in the data set. So it's both ways, right? It's protecting the structure of it and the content of it.
For sure. Yeah. You can even change if you're using ChatGPT and it has multiple prompts, you've been building prompts, you can turn off its ability to see across prompt. So maybe your personal ChatGPT is learning more about you the more you use it. But then on the business side, you're having every prompt kind of be its individual automation. That is interesting. Is there a pattern or school of thought that you've come across when, building in regulated industries? Like, how do you educate conservative industries about the need for technical change?
I think that educated industries know they need technical change. They're surrounded by it every day. It's just a question of how. So in the same way, we had to start with doctors to do explainable AI as opposed to a black box. It's no different with lawyers. You just have to be able to give them the logic behind how it works so they can understand in a method and manner where they can digest it. Because they're smart people. We all know that AI and technology is eating the world. So it's a question of partnering with it, especially on the agentic front, and having your coworkers. Some are AI agents, some are people. I think it's enhancement for all of us and it gets stuff done. It's not just an enhancement, it's also a coworker in a sense. People are recognizing that's the case. And if you can show them the business case for it, you can make that case like, look, it's expensive for you to hire all these people to just do this. You can use agentic AI to do this and probably do it a lot better and more accurate. And by the way, it costs you almost nothing. So when it comes to revenue, people like, okay, this hits my bottom line. Now I'm going to listen. If you can explain the way it hits their bottom line and makes them more efficient, effective, and productive, and as their margins either maintained or growing, then I think you'll get an audience.
Yeah, totally. And then you can calculate the risk because there's an upside.
Right.
So I'll be willing to deal with the auditors if I know that. I also see like SOC 2, the HIPAA, these compliance things. I think the mind shift to making those part of the go-to-market strategy rather than the thing we need to have, like in most industries, like in tech services, the bigger customers always have more of a barrier. If early on I understand that it's part of my go-to-market, it's a differentiator that I have these compliance, that I'm getting third-party attestation, that compliance is a sales tool, not a barrier to entry. Yes, it is both things, but I think shifting the mindset to let's go ahead and do this because we're going to be able to win business and reduce friction for our larger clients. It really is part of the product that it's secure, that it's private. I think that's so essential, but I think most entrepreneurs think of it as a have to rather than a get to.
Yeah, I think that's right. But again, if you go back to my earlier comments on moving from risk to trust, that's an absolute check mark for people. If it's going to remove some of that risk and make people trust you more, then there's your answer, right?
Yeah, for sure. You're such a prolific writer and speaker across multiple platforms, but how has content creation and thought leadership impacted your business ventures and what you're able to accomplish in business?
Get your message out to a greater number of people. It does give you, when you speak, if you're reasonably intelligent in what you're saying and you know what you're doing, people will listen, especially if you're innovating in an area that a lot of people don't have a lot of knowledge in or curious about or what have you. So I feel like if you get out there and really give people good nuggets, good advice, and good thought leadership, then they'll follow you and they know more about what you're doing. And if they know more what you're doing, they take a bigger interest. Sometimes that whole branding and PR piece, it's not something that happens without doing those things. And so it just depends on your business. Do you need people to know you? Do you not want people to know about you? Are you out there in trying to promote your product and selling? So it all depends on what your goals are. If getting yourself in front of specific audiences is a goal, then you have to look at the audiences, how to get in front of them, and what you have to do to get there.
Do you think that the role in personal branding in building technology companies is especially essential for the regulated fields? Like, think of it as the bigger of an influencer I am, the easier it makes everything I do. I wonder what your experience has been.
I think that's probably just true in life, right? As long as your quote unquote influencer marketing brand doesn't have any risks associated with it, or there's nothing inherent in it that could be risky. So if you're in somebody who's really in blockchain, there's other people that won't want to have anything to do with that. If you're in other industries, if you're in industries like that, then I think you have to be very thoughtful. And that's why, for instance, people who are growing up in their early stages of their careers, right? They have to really think about what they're doing and what they're putting out there on social media, because it doesn't go away. It's part of who you are. It's part of your brand. And you might not want to be part of your brand later. You don't know what you don't know. I think sometimes it's always good if you feel certainly you have passion, that's great. But there are certain industries that people don't always want to get involved with when it comes to risk. So you have to think about it from that perspective. Is what I'm going to do going to create a risk for my company? Is my stand on this going to create a risk? Do I care anyway? Is it appropriate for my company that I'm in this conversation or in that conversation? When you run a company, you are the face of the company. So you have to recognize there's people that work for you, there's products, there's people, there's customers. It may or may not be your role to take positions that either work with the company or don't work with the company. Sometimes there's house divided, right? And when it comes to customers or employees. And so you just need to be thoughtful. Is this the right forum for me to express my thoughts? Even on private forums, I think a lot of CEOs ran into a lot of those problems and both sides of the fence, depending on whatever the issues were. Some people didn't care and some people cared, and it impacted their business for sure. So is that the right thing to do for the business? Is it not? I think your goal here is, as a CEO, you have to do what's right for the business, for the shareholders, especially in the board. You're on the board, you have a fiduciary duty. As a lawyer, I'm very aware of that. I'm on a lot of boards. You have to think about how you put yourself out there, and is it in alignment with what your obligations are and duties as a CEO?
Yeah, I have a really good friend that was running a really successful business. His COO was very left leaning. He was very right leaning. He had the kind of the thought. He's also very, very active on social media, influencer. So he waited until that business was sold before he started engaging in the more political discourse. He just, out of respect for my CEO and my business, I'm going to wait. And then the opportunity came to sell the business. So he sold the business. And now he's very vocal about his conservative views. I thought that was really wise, that he really did restrict himself from a certain amount of public discourse about a topic that wasn't a fit for his internal team. Some people might criticize that as you're not being true to yourself or what. I think he just took his time.
Yeah, he thought about everybody and all those people that make up the company, not just himself. And he put the company first. There's times when CEOs need to lead on issues and get out there early, and sometimes not. It's a call that usually should be thought through very carefully at the board level. Everybody's impacted when it's a company. When you're not in your public role as a CEO, because honestly, CEOs' personal views matter, right? It makes a difference. You can't say, well, I don't care. No, you chose to take either investor money, or if it's your own money, you chose to hire people that are diverse. You have to be respectful and thoughtful. If there's investors involved, or if there's that people's jobs depend on this, then I think you have to be a responsible adult. Let me think about what my personal thoughts are going to impact all these people in a really negative way. Maybe I need to step aside before I express them. I think it's a responsible thing to do.
You're serving on multiple boards. What's the most common mistakes entrepreneurs making today?
I think one of the big ones is when CEOs are not transparent with the board. That's a big problem. You have to create an environment of trust and accountability. And it's sometimes hard. I think under communicating is one of the big issues I see that entrepreneurs make. Also thinking of your board and your investors as part of your team, helping you solve problems if you have them, not having to feel like you have to come to a board and be perfect, because frankly, investors and boards know you're not perfect. So if you are always presenting yourself as perfect, they're not going to trust it either. Being sincere and saying, look, I want to get your input on how I should handle this issue. A lot of these people have a lot more experience, so ask them. That's why they're there. And and they enjoy that role. I think not making good use of the people they surrounded themselves with, or maybe not surrounding themselves with the right people. Maybe their board is not appropriate for what they're doing. We see companies who start early and they put their buds on it because my buddy's going to vote with me all the time. Actually, your buddy might be doing that, but that won't be what's best for you or for the company. And by the way, you have shares in the company. So you want the best. You want people who are going to challenge you. You want people not just to say yes to you. You want people who are going to make suggestions how you could do things better, right? So I think that's one of the big issues I see also when it comes to CEOs is they really don't either populate the board right or use it in the best way to benefit them and help them propel the company forward.
Yeah, and I wonder why that is. Is that like my stuff doesn't stink, stay out of my business? Do you think that's grounded in an arrogance, or do you think that's like, because I feel like if I'm going to take money from someone, then it's smart money. And it's not just about the money, take the money and let me go do what I want with it. But it is the advice and the experience of the investor, the connections. I find in my startup life, I'm very demanding of the folks that have put in money because they're the most incentivized to get the return. And
Right.
I don't want to feel like I'm carrying all these investors on my shoulders. I've become a modern version of slave labor. And then we get to the end and they get a big check and I did all the work. I don't want to feel that way. So I would rather be somewhat vulnerable in the sense of here's what's working, here's what's not working, here's what the books really look like. How can you help me? Because then when we get to the end and we sell the business, we're all standing on the proverbial podium together going, hey, we did it together. The amount of risk that we all took is proportionate. And that story feels so much better. But I wonder what that mindset is about take the money and run it my way.
It's primarily insecurity because even arrogance is insecurity, right? The narcissistic sort of is also deep down insecurity. So I think people are worried. They're worried, is this person going to keep me in the seat? Am I going to lose my job? Am I lose my company? Are they going to doubt and not support me? If what you're sharing gives people that much discomfort that they want to replace you, then maybe you're not the best person in that role. Maybe be better in another role. So I feel like it's a lot of insecurity. It happens a lot with first-time founders where they want to try and show that they are, and sometimes people who are not usually in the C-suite, they have a bit of a chip where they feel like they need to prove themselves more and actually sometimes works against them because we can all relate. Like our favorite movies are the underdog. So we can all empathize and we root for the underdogs, right? Somebody who's perfect, first of all, they're not perfect. So then you're like, why are they not being honest with me? If they share their imperfections, your job, since you're invested, is to help them overcome those blemishes and make the company successful. That is, of course, with a big caveat, the people who you're taking that information from or that advice from know what they're talking about. There's some people that come in and they just want to be on boards and they're from a different area and they don't know anything about what. And so then there's a lack of respect between the CEO and those people, and they expect them to be yes people, but then they ask questions and they get angry. They ask questions because they really don't know what talking about. So then you shouldn't have them on your board. So I just think that it's about selecting the board is one of the most critical things you do, and pushing back when you want people who want to invest and be on the board. They have money, but maybe they don't have the qualifications to be on your board. Saying I love you on the board, or I can put you on the board for now, but you'll be replaced at the next round when you have outside money coming in. Whatever it is you need to do, you need to raise your money, but you also need to recognize that as you grow a company, you need to have a knowledgeable board that knows what they're doing in the vertical that can really give you great advice.
You speak multiple languages professionally. Has the global perspective influenced your approach to building businesses?
So I've traveled a lot all over the world in a lot of places. And I think that always helps because when you go out of your situation or your comfort zone, it gives you new ways to think and look at things and new people to meet and understand and appreciate what they create and what they bring to the table. So I think it's really cemented my diversity of thought focus. I really like diversity of thought on boards. I like it in the teams because healthcare serves everybody. And so getting all those diverse points of view is critical to making the best decisions for your customers.
Yeah, love that. I want to be respectful of your time. If people like what you've had to share today, how would you like them to connect with you?
LinkedIn probably is the best. If there's people who are interested in fund investment, certainly reach out to me. We're always talking to investors. If they're AI-enabled diagnostic companies, we see over 100 a month. I do answer the LinkedIn stuff. I don't see it all the time and not consistently, but I do answer it.
Yeah, awesome. And you answered my next question. I started asking, and who do you want to speak to? And you naturally answered that. people who have AI technology that want to seek funding and seek advice on how to go to market. That's great. I really appreciate your time. You have a really diverse background. It's been great chatting with you. Thank you so much for your time today.
Likewise, thanks so much for your time. Appreciate the questions.